On a quiet street in Chicago, 7-year-old Emma's wheelchair suddenly breaks down, leaving her helpless and scared. Her mother, Claire, 30 years old, is busy on a call, unaware of the struggle outside. But then, a kind 25-year-old mechanic named Jake notices her. With birds chirping in the background, he begins building and repairing her wheelchair, turning a moment of despair into a miracle. What happens next will change Emma's life forever. Like, share and subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Now let's get started. Emma had always been a bright, curious 7-year-old, full of energy and imagination. But her rare spinal condition kept her confined to a wheelchair, making simple childhood joys a challenge. She lived in a quiet Chicago suburb with her mother, Claire, a 30-year-old entrepreneur who spent long hours managing her business but always made time for Emma. Despite her limitations, Emma found ways to explore the world, reading adventure stories, drawing fantastical worlds, and chatting with friends online. Yet there were moments when she felt trapped, longing for the freedom her peers took for granted. Today was one of those moments. It was a chilly autumn afternoon, with leaves crunching underfoot and a light breeze carrying the scent of nearby bakeries. Emma's wheelchair, an electric model she had grown accustomed to, suddenly jerked and stopped completely while she was trying to glide down the sidewalk outside her home. Panic filled her small chest. She tried pressing the controls again, but the device remained stubbornly still. Emma's heart pounded as she realized she couldn't move an inch. She looked around, hoping someone would notice, but passers-by simply glanced and continued walking. The feeling of helplessness was overwhelming. Claire, busy on a call with a client, didn't notice the struggle at first. Emma tried to call her, but the sound of the wind and traffic made it difficult to be heard. She tugged at the wheelchair's handles, her small hands trembling with effort. Tears welled up in her eyes, not from pain, but from frustration. She had always been strong in spirit, determined to face her challenges, but being stuck in one place made her feel vulnerable in a way she hadn't experienced before. The world seemed bigger and more intimidating than usual, and she wished for a miracle. Meanwhile, Jake, a 25-year-old mechanic, was finishing his workday at a small garage a few blocks away. He had a reputation for being resourceful and kind, often helping neighbors with small repairs for free. He was walking home along the sidewalk when he noticed Emma sitting in her motionless wheelchair. Something about the sight struck him immediately. Her expression, a mixture of fear and hope, pulled at his heart. Without hesitation, he crossed the street and knelt beside her, introducing himself with a gentle smile. "Hi, I'm Jake. Can I help you?" he asked. Emma blinked, unsure if she could trust a stranger, but there was something in Jake's tone that felt safe. Emma nodded and he carefully inspected the wheelchair. He asked questions about when it had last worked, if any parts had made unusual noises, and observed the wheels and motor closely. Claire, still on her phone, noticed Jake and ran over, concern written across her face. She hurriedly ended the call, relief flooding her as she realized someone was helping her daughter. "Thank you for stopping," she said, her voice a mixture of gratitude and urgency. Jake waved it off modestly, focusing on diagnosing the problem. As he examined the wheelchair, Jake noticed that the motor had burned out, a major issue that would normally require ordering parts and taking several days to fix. But he didn't panic. He had always been creative when it came to mechanical problems, often improvising solutions when needed. He explained the situation to Claire calmly, offering a temporary fix that could give Emma mobility while he worked on a more permanent repair. Emma listened closely, her eyes widening as hope sparked inside her. For the first time that afternoon, she imagined moving freely again. Jake worked quickly, pulling small tools and spare parts from his bag. He explained what he was doing to Emma in a way she could understand, which distracted her from the worry that had been building up. "See these wires?" he asked. "I'm connecting them to a battery that can power your wheelchair just for today. You'll be able to move around while we figure out a permanent solution." Emma's eyes lit up as she absorbed every word. Claire watched in amazement, realizing that Jake's skills and kindness had created a moment of hope in what had started as a frightening afternoon. In less than an hour, Jake's improvisation paid off. Emma's wheelchair hummed to life, responding smoothly to the controls. She tentatively pressed the joystick forward, and the chair glided down the sidewalk. A smile spread across her face, pure joy radiating from her tiny frame. She laughed, a sound so full of relief and happiness that passers-by paused to watch. Claire's eyes welled with tears, and she hugged Jake tightly, thanking him over and over. Emma, thrilled by the newfound freedom, spun in circles and waved to neighbors, who smiled at the sight. Jake's efforts had turned a moment of despair into a memory they would cherish forever. As Emma navigated the sidewalk, she realized how much she had missed the sensation of movement. Her wheelchair had been more than a tool. It was a gateway to independence she rarely experienced. The feeling of control over her own body, even temporarily, gave her a sense of empowerment that filled her heart with gratitude. Jake watched her, happy to see her joy. He didn't need accolades or payment. The smile on Emma's face was reward enough. Claire, deeply moved, felt a surge of appreciation for this young man who had stepped into their lives at just the right moment. After making sure Emma could move safely, Jake explained what needed to happen next. He promised to repair the wheelchair properly in the following days, and even offered to bring some upgrades to make it more reliable. Claire nodded, grateful for his dedication and patience. She realized that people like Jake, who combined skill with empathy, were rare. Emma, meanwhile, was still beaming, her laughter echoing down the street. The experience had transformed an ordinary afternoon into something extraordinary, a moment where kindness and ingenuity created a small miracle in their lives. Before leaving, Jake knelt beside Emma again, making sure she understood how to operate the wheelchair safely with the temporary fix. "Take it slow at first," he said gently. "You've got this." Emma nodded enthusiastically, gripping the controls. Claire watched, her heart full of gratitude. She realized that beyond the mechanical repair, Jake had given Emma confidence, hope, and a sense of independence she hadn't felt in months. The world suddenly seemed brighter, filled with possibility, all because a stranger had taken the time to care. Emma waved goodbye as Jake walked back toward his apartment, feeling a sense of wonder she hadn't experienced before. Claire held her daughter close, whispering, "You're going to be okay." People like Jake remind us that kindness exists everywhere. Emma nodded, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. The wheelchair, once a source of limitation, had been transformed into a symbol of freedom, and Jake had become an unexpected hero in her young life. That afternoon would be remembered forever as the day a stranger turned her wheelchair into a miracle. Jake quickly realized that the wheelchair's motor problem was more serious than a simple repair could fix. The delicate wiring had been damaged, and several components were outdated, making replacement parts difficult to find immediately. But he didn't let that discourage him. He was resourceful and had a knack for improvisation. Pulling out spare batteries, small motors, and other mechanical parts from his garage, he began assembling a temporary solution that could restore Emma's mobility safely. Emma watched with fascination, leaning forward in her chair as Jake carefully adjusted the wires and components, explaining each step in a way she could understand. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity as Jake worked, occasionally asking questions that showed her genuine interest. "What does that little motor do?" she asked, pointing to a tiny device he had attached. Jake smiled, happy to explain. "It helps the wheels move smoothly. Think of it like giving your chair a little extra push whenever you need it." Emma nodded, absorbing every word. Claire watched silently, amazed at how Jake engaged Emma not only with his skill, but also with his kindness. In that moment, it was clear that this young mechanic was more than someone fixing a wheelchair. He was giving Emma hope. As the afternoon sun dipped lower in the sky, Jake continued his work, carefully testing each adjustment. Emma, growing more excited by the minute, kept pressing the joystick gently, testing the wheelchair's response. "It's moving a little," she exclaimed, her face lighting up. Jake chuckled and encouraged her to try again. The temporary device he had improvised allowed Emma to glide forward, backward, and even turn in small circles. Claire's heart swelled with relief and gratitude. Seeing her daughter experience this newfound mobility, even temporarily, was overwhelming. The sense of freedom on Emma's face reminded Claire why every effort, every act of kindness mattered so much. Neighbors began to notice the commotion, pausing on their walks to watch. Children waved, and a few adults smiled, appreciating the scene of a small miracle unfolding on their street. Emma's laughter was contagious, drawing people closer. She spun in circles, her wheelchair responding perfectly to her commands. Claire stepped back for a moment, letting her daughter revel in the joy of movement, tears quietly streaming down her cheeks. She silently thanked Jake for his skill, his creativity, and most importantly, his empathy. It was a reminder that sometimes it's the simplest acts that leave the biggest impact on people's lives. Jake paused to explain the next step, making sure Emma understood the temporary fix. "This will give you control for now, but we'll need to make it permanent soon," he said. Emma nodded seriously, her little face focused. "I want to go fast," she exclaimed, a mixture of determination and excitement in her tone. Claire laughed softly, shaking her head. She knew Emma's energy was boundless, and thanks to Jake, her daughter now had a safe way to explore it. Jake smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment he rarely experienced with his day-to-day work. Helping someone regain independence was far more rewarding than any paycheck. Once the wheelchair was fully functional, Emma began moving down the sidewalk more confidently. She navigated around obstacles with surprising skill, her small hands gripping the controls firmly. The temporary motor and wiring allowed her to experience a level of freedom she hadn't felt in months. Claire followed closely, making sure she remained safe. The sight of her daughter spinning, turning, and laughing freely was almost overwhelming. The fear and helplessness from earlier were replaced with pure joy. Emma looked up at Jake and Claire, her face radiant. "Thank you," she said softly. "I can move again." Her words carried the weight of all the frustration and longing she had felt before. Jake, observing her joy, felt a deep satisfaction. He had spent hours tinkering, improvising, and problem-solving, but the smile on Emma's face made every second worthwhile. He had never considered himself a hero, yet in this moment he understood the profound impact his skills could have. Claire approached him, tears in her eyes, expressing her gratitude repeatedly. "You don't know what this means to us," she said. "You've given her hope and joy." "I can't thank you enough." Jake shook his head modestly, brushing off the praise. "I just did what I could," he replied, though he secretly felt proud of what he had accomplished. Emma, eager to test the limits of her temporary mobility, started weaving in gentle curves, laughing with delight. She explored the sidewalk, navigating around trees and park benches, discovering the joy of independence. Each movement reinforced her confidence, making her feel stronger and more capable. Claire watched from nearby, her heart swelling with pride. This moment was more than just a temporary fix. It was a turning point for Emma, showing her that challenges could be overcome with creativity, patience, and kindness. The simple act of restoring movement had transformed a frightening day into one of empowerment and happiness. By early evening, Jake had finished all adjustments, ensuring the wheelchair was stable and safe. Claire asked 100 questions about maintenance and safety, which Jake patiently answered. He provided advice on charging, handling obstacles, and precautions to take while Emma explored her mobility. Claire appreciated his thoroughness, realizing that his care extended far beyond technical skills. Emma, meanwhile, was busy exploring every corner of the sidewalk, her laughter echoing through the street. The sense of freedom and independence she felt was intoxicating, and it filled Claire with gratitude for Jake's ingenuity and dedication. Before leaving, Jake knelt beside Emma, making sure she felt comfortable and confident with the temporary setup. "Take it slow at first, and always remember you can control it," he said gently. Emma nodded eagerly, gripping the joystick. "I will," she replied, her eyes shining with excitement. Claire hugged Jake, expressing gratitude once more. She realized that this young mechanic had done more than fix a wheelchair. He had restored hope, independence, and confidence to her daughter. The simple act of kindness had ripple effects that extended far beyond what anyone could measure. As Jake packed up his tools, Claire invited him to stay for a quick cup of tea. They spoke about life, challenges, and the importance of helping others. Jake felt comfortable with the family, enjoying their warmth and openness. Emma continued to move her wheelchair around the yard, testing its capabilities and laughing. The temporary device had created a sense of liberation for her, a feeling she hadn't experienced in months. Claire watched, reflecting on how a stranger's intervention had brought so much happiness into their lives. She knew this day would be remembered forever, a testament to human kindness and ingenuity. By nightfall, Emma reluctantly stopped exploring, exhausted but elated. Claire tucked her into bed, whispering reassurances and reliving the day's events. Emma fell asleep, dreaming of adventures, parks, and the freedom she had experienced thanks to Jake. Claire, sitting quietly in the room, thought about how small acts of kindness could change lives. Jake, walking home under the starry Chicago sky, reflected on the joy he had brought to a young girl and her family. He felt a quiet sense of fulfillment, knowing that even temporary solutions, when delivered with care, could create lasting memories and hope. The next morning, Claire insisted on properly thanking Jake for the miracle he had performed. She called him over for breakfast at their home, a warm gesture of appreciation. Jake hesitated at first, modest and shy, but Claire's insistence won him over. Emma, already awake and buzzing with excitement, greeted him with a big smile. She could hardly wait to show off her newfound mobility indoors. Jake felt a sense of anticipation as he entered the house, curious about the family's home life and happy to see Emma's joy firsthand. It was a small step toward connection beyond just the wheelchair repair. Over breakfast, Claire expressed her gratitude repeatedly, while Jake smiled and shrugged modestly. He wasn't used to such attention, but appreciated the sincerity. Emma, unable to contain her excitement, recounted every detail of how her wheelchair had moved the previous day. Her laughter and stories filled the room with energy and warmth. Jake listened intently, occasionally nodding and smiling at her enthusiasm. The family shared a quiet bond that morning, a mix of gratitude, admiration, and relief. Claire realized that true wealth wasn't measured in money, but in the kindness people extended to one another. Emma kept testing her wheelchair around the house, maneuvering through doorways and corners with newfound confidence. She laughed when she nearly bumped into the living room table, and Jake helped steady her, showing her the best techniques. Claire watched from the kitchen, amazed at how quickly her daughter adapted to the temporary adjustments. The act of giving Emma mobility had transformed not just her physical freedom, but her confidence and sense of independence. Each small success was a triumph, and each smile reinforced the power of human kindness. Emma's spirit, once cautious and limited, now felt free to explore and enjoy her surroundings. As the morning turned into afternoon, Claire suggested a short walk outside to give Emma a chance to explore the neighborhood. Jake accompanied them, helping Emma navigate safely along sidewalks and curb cuts. Neighbors who had witnessed the previous day's events waved and greeted Emma warmly. She felt like a small celebrity, celebrated not for wealth or fame, but for her courage and the miracle she had experienced. Claire felt a deep sense of gratitude and connection to her community. Jake's intervention had done more than repair a wheelchair. It had created a ripple of positivity that touched everyone around them. During their walk, Claire shared stories about her childhood and family, hoping to build a sense of trust with Jake. She admired his humility, skill, and kindness. Jake, in turn, talked about his life as a mechanic, his passion for creating solutions, and the satisfaction of helping others. The conversation flowed naturally, revealing a common belief in empathy, compassion, and the joy of making a difference. Emma listened intently, fascinated by the connection forming between her mother and Jake. The morning that started with worry had turned into a shared experience that bonded them in unexpected ways. Back home, Jake continued to check the wheelchair for safety, making minor adjustments and improvements. He wanted to ensure that Emma could use it without risk while waiting for permanent repairs. Blair watched, deeply impressed by his thoroughness and dedication. Every movement he made was deliberate, careful, and thoughtful. Emma, meanwhile, experimented with more complex maneuvers, testing her limits and delighting in her own skill. The temporary mobility had opened a world of possibility for her, transforming a device once associated with limitation into a symbol of freedom, confidence, and hope. As the day wore on, Emma grew tired but content. She leaned back in her wheelchair, reflecting on all that had happened. Her mind was filled with excitement, gratitude, and wonder. Jake had done more than repair machinery. He had given her something priceless, the ability to move independently, even temporarily. Claire approached Emma, kneeling beside her, and whispered words of comfort and pride. Emma's eyes sparkled as she shared her happiness, recounting the movements, spins, and tiny adventures she had experienced. It was a moment of bonding, celebration, and reassurance that kindness could change lives in meaningful ways. Claire invited Jake to stay for dinner, wanting to extend their appreciation. Over the meal, they shared more stories, laughter, and ideas. The initial formality of a stranger helping her child had transformed into a sense of family and friendship. Jake felt at home in a way he rarely did, and Claire realized that acts of kindness could create lasting relationships, not just fleeting moments. Emma, full of energy, continued to explore the room in her wheelchair, occasionally spinning in joyful circles. The house felt alive with warmth, laughter, and connection, a testament to the impact of one selfless act. After dinner, Jake explained plans for permanent repairs to the wheelchair. He discussed the parts he would need, timelines, and upgrades that could improve its reliability. Claire listened attentively, appreciating his honesty and commitment. Emma, meanwhile, rested beside the table, exhausted but thrilled by the day's events. The temporary mobility had given her a taste of independence, and now she eagerly anticipated the future improvements Jake promised. The experience had not only restored movement, but instilled hope, confidence, and joy, emotions that money or technology alone could never provide. By nightfall, the household settled into calm. Emma was tucked into bed, her wheelchair parked nearby, a symbol of the miracle that had transformed her day. Claire reflected quietly on the events, grateful for Jake's presence and the kindness he had shown. She understood that the day was more than a mechanical repair. It was a lesson in empathy, humanity, and the power of giving. Jake left the house under the quiet Chicago sky, satisfied and fulfilled, knowing he had changed a young girl's life. The impact of his actions would resonate far beyond the temporary fix he had provided. The days that followed continued to reflect the transformation Jake had initiated. Emma navigated her wheelchair with growing confidence, exploring parks, streets, and indoor spaces she had previously only imagined. Claire monitored her daughter carefully, but allowed her freedom, seeing the joy and self-assurance that Jake's intervention had fostered. Neighbors and friends noticed the change in Emma's spirit and often complimented her newfound confidence. Jake's act of kindness had sparked a ripple effect, inspiring others to act generously and creatively in their own lives. The miracle of that day was not only in movement but in connection, inspiration, and hope. In the weeks that followed, Jake completed permanent repairs on Emma's wheelchair, ensuring it was safe, reliable, and efficient. Claire remained deeply appreciative, offering payment, gifts, and invitations, all of which Jake politely declined. His satisfaction came from the knowledge that Emma could move freely, experience joy, and feel independent. Emma, now capable of exploring her world with confidence, often thought of Jake, grateful for the stranger who had turned a moment of fear into a lasting memory. Claire realized that some acts of kindness leave impressions far stronger than wealth, status, or time. Emma's life had been forever touched by a stranger's heart. By the time summer approached, Emma's confidence had grown tremendously. She played with friends, explored new places, and embraced challenges she had once avoided. Claire observed the remarkable transformation, knowing it all began with one person noticing a child in need. Jake occasionally visited, sharing updates, tips, and encouragement. The bond that formed went beyond mere friendship. It became a story of hope, compassion, and humanity. Emma, inspired by the kindness she experienced, often shared her story with peers, teaching them the value of generosity and empathy. A single act had created endless ripples of positivity.